Good late Thursday, early Friday, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center, giving you a look at these temperatures across the region. I don't know it's a calmer pattern, a little more casual tonight here, repping FSU. And I know that Knowles team has a big game ahead on Saturday afternoon there. I mean, really now, as we're looking at things, the stadium there. Just not quite as many seats, so those tickets are going for a little bit more in general, and everybody's just always so excited to see the Northern accent when they're doing so well. Number 7 in the country, playing Kent State Saturday afternoon at 3:30 on the ACC network. After that, they'll be going up to Virginia on a Friday night before coming back to play Miami in what could be one of the bigger FSU games here. I mean, obviously 2023, but just in general, one of the bigger FSU games here in a while. I mean, so that'll be something to look forward to if the Noles can take care of business the next couple weeks. Miami has a big game as well, so we're seeing that weather forecast for that as well here as we look ahead. I know down towards South Florida, a few more storms are possible. I know fall starting soon. I mean, it's 64 degrees right now, so the weather here at least doing us some favors overall. We do have some drought concerns that we are looking toward if we don't get enough rain, but I'm hoping we'll get enough rain here in the next weeks to come. Just don't want a tropical system to be a part of that. Nothing next week that we have to worry about. After that, you just never know. We'll watch, but nothing of imminent concern right now as we're just looking here at the maps across the region. I know you see 68 around Keystone, but again, my rural area, we're at 64 here east of Stark, and then you see 70 around Gainesville. You see 75 there in Tallahassee, Leon County. That's where the Noles will be playing there on Saturday. The Gators will be playing down in South Florida. They're going to be down there. And let's go ahead and take a look here. And you see the general thunderstorm risk around. So a few isolated thunderstorms possible within those here on your Friday, but nothing too concerning. We'll watch for high school football purposes. But as you look downstate, it is a little warmer this time of night. That's just how it kind of goes here in this overall pattern. I know like in the ward of December, people were headed down toward like Miami and Key West to try to get away from the cold. I mean, it's not cold. Yeah, we like the cold that we're dealing with right now, when we can get it, if you want to call it that. I mean, we had 54 here on Monday morning in our rural area here in North Florida in, mid-September. So that's, record type cold or cool or lows. Maybe, nothing like what we had back there in January for sure, where we had that snow around. But as we're kind of watching things, as we're kind of tracking things here, I know there's a severe weather risk as we look here toward parts of Kansas there on that Friday. Even a little bit of a tornado risk there as we get into North Kansas and Nebraska. It's cool right now, but that doesn't preclude a severe risk there. You see McCook, Nebraska, northern Kansas involved in that. A little warmer down here in Oklahoma right now where we have some thunderstorms. We'll see if any of those. We had some warnings earlier on as we're looking toward Oklahoma. We'll see if we get some more warnings later on. But you see around Elk City there, south of Enid, some thunderstorm activity. We'll be watching to see if you have any of those, disrupting those football games as we look ahead in toward the timeline here on that local level and for that game downstate for Florida. I know the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they'll be playing there at home on Sunday. We'll have to see if there's some development there with some shower accident or a thunderstorm. That's not one of the ones I have in my graphic package here to tell you, but we'll get to that here in just a moment. As we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here, again, it's all about the garnet and gold for me. I know for some of you, maybe it's about the University of Florida's game or the University of Miami there. Just all those different colors football games and acts. And of course, we'll talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars as well here. So this, important to kind of watch and look at. I know we do have the tropics here. We do have a Gabrielle out there, but again, not as we kind of, with this mood here talking, not a big concern. Let me go ahead and put on some more satellite information. I'm going to start off with water vapor. You see some dry air parts of the Atlantic, even toward the Gulf, if you look really closely there. It's been so dry. We had some thunderstorms here in a very isolated nature in that Thursday developed into South Georgia. I was noting some of those. But, as we're looking here, a lot of dry air out here. And we'll go ahead and switch on over now toward the infrared itself, and you can see we're seeing some convection here with Gabrielle, but it's expected to turn. And as we're looking out there in the basin, you see a hurricane maybe, is what we would expect this to be, and maybe going east of Bermuda, but they still have to monitor it. But you see right now that track has it going well toward the east coast, maybe some marine impacts, and we still have that northeastern wind pattern here where we're going to have rip currents around even toward the weekend. For those Atlantic beaches, we have to just kind of watch out here, with that around, and maybe some of those, coastal flood issues. We'll have to just, monitor all of that here, obviously. But again, it's been a calm pattern. Eventually, this won't be the case. Nothing, in the immediate future saying that we're just going to have, big weather problems. There could be, in about a week from now, maybe some, storm action that's a little bit more organized that could lead to some stronger storms with a boundary, maybe. But we shall see. That's what you would expect, though, if you're kind of trying to get, toward fall, further into it without maybe tropical action. But you just never know. Things can change very rapidly, obviously. And, that can, be a pattern here where we all of a sudden see things become favorable with like a Central American gyre. So we've had that's how Michael developed and weaker systems and that, obviously. But in toward October, we have to be mindful of that here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. We'll be paying attention, but right now it's all quiet out there in terms of any local, land impacts. That's what we like to see here, obviously. As we go ahead and pull on up the graphics here right now, I'll go ahead and switch on over here toward the other mode, and you'll be able to see all of our names. It's been quiet recently, very quiet. We had that period here. We didn't really have anything, maybe a coastal low off of Virginia, North Carolina, but didn't get a name. Maybe they'll do something in post-analysis, but we haven't really hardly talked about that too much. Not something we were too concerned with, but Gabrielle's the name now, Umberto after that, Umberto, Melda, and even Gabrielle, all storms that have over the years had some different impacts on the U.S., but not enough to be retired here. As we're looking, Karen was one that when I was at FSU there in 2013, there was a lot of concern for us for a period there. They might have a hurricane, trying to get toward the coast there in the Panhandle, and it just completely fizzled. It wasn't even, it wasn't anything by the time it wasn't even a, tropical system at all by the time it got to the coast. So, so it's important, those forecasting tools here, in meteorology, so important here because it's, nicer to have a handle on what's going to happen a little bit further out. I remember back then it was like, we have a hurricane. We ended up not having anything, tropical from that at all back in 2013. But as we go ahead and say here that tropical climatology, you can see here that peak of hurricane season lasting still for another 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll be watching that here. You got to pay attention. Don't let your guard down. Right now the coast is clear, but that doesn't mean it'll stay clear. So just continue to pay attention. Now, tragically, of course, Helene, was a storm that, was just catastrophic, and we're coming up on an anniversary here, a little, there as we're looking ahead over a week away, technically, because it'll be like next Friday night at 11:10 with that landfall into that Saturday as we're looking at things. But 140 mile an hour Cat 4, 939 millibars, just an awful situation towards some of those local counties, Taylor and just so many up in the ward, like Valdosta, Lowndes County there, up toward areas there, like around Douglas and Coffee County as well, and then up toward western North Carolina, so many fatalities there. Handful in our area, just tragic, one is too many. But then around Augusta, they had a lot of problems with trees falling on homes in the middle of the night. And, he lost a lot of folks up in that area as well. Just absolutely awful. As we go ahead and look here at that rainfall forecast, you can see here not a whole bunch toward like Tallahassee, and we're starting to have some drought concerns, which I'll say here in a moment, but it's not completely zero. This is something where it's not just going to be, unless we have a tropical system, something that just changes dramatically here. But, if we go week by week and don't get a bunch, and it's going to become a bigger concern. Right now, not a huge concern, but if we keep, getting this tri-pattern to last, because if you all of a sudden you don't get too many lines to come through as storms, you don't get tropical systems, and you're not having a sea breeze storms because we're out of that period, then you could really have problems going into the spring here. Hope that doesn't happen, but it's not off the table. But you can see clutter.com/radar gives an interactive look at things. We're not on the air, but you can kind of see what we're down with right now with the rainfall. You can see off toward Flagler, St. John's, Putnam, a little bit more over in that vicinity. So be watching that, obviously. Towards Stark, you see like 1/4 of an inch. You see eastern Oklahoma there, they're seeing more precip. Southwest Missouri on the very, corner there before we have my information about the interactive radar. You have some stuff in Missouri there too with some precip. They've had some storms up there. As we've been looking at things, no warnings at the moment, but there have been some storms around there. Let me go ahead and switch back over to the other mode real quick. You see stuff kind of fizzling right now, but you see here as we zoom in, I mean, you have areas there on the map. We'll have to see how things transpire. Last 12 hours of precip. Now you're getting, as far eastward there in the timeline. We'll look at the thunderstorm risk for that Friday there, and you can kind of see there is one present there, but not, an overwhelming risk. But I have kept your up here. I know it's, after midnight, obviously, so, it's late Thursday, late Friday update, but later this morning, KFES 12, morning meteorologist Brian Allworth, they're going to give his farewell message there after almost 4 decades on the air. I interned at the station, but I wasn't on that same shift with him, so only met him a couple of times, but he seemed like a real nice guy. And congratulations, Brian, on your retirement there at the station. He was, and still has one more day this morning with the breakfast show on KFES 12, but there for almost 4 decades. What a remarkable career for him. I think he started, I believe it was 1987 when I was looking it up there the other day. I want to say December of 87, so, that's just really, really impressive there. That'll be on from 5:30 to 8 Eastern time, or 4:30 to 7 a.m. Central time out that way on their, app. You can watch it all over the country, whether it's on, on their Facebook, not necessarily, they might simulcast there, but on their website, on Roku, and the like. But you can see temperatures here, a little warmer than what we have here. We're at 64 here in North Florida. They're at 68 around Cape Girardeau there, Cape County, and that area there as you're looking, 73 up toward Perryville. But as we get back up toward our area here, I mean, some of our temperatures are a little warmer, just depends on where you are. But, again, where we're at, we're down to 64. You see, these are some of these observations here. I mean, as you look and as you track, 66 there toward parts of the west side of Jacksonville, for instance, right now, to kind of give some, lend credence here to what we've been talking about. With the temperature a little cooler. I mean, it was quite a bit of a difference here that Monday morning with that dry air working in 54. I mean, that's, remarkable here for, mid-September. So it's been very calm. Obviously you wanted to stay that way, but you have to have some rain. You're going to have a fire threat and it won't be calm even if you don't have rain. So you have to be kind of careful here. It's a tricky thing sometimes, but that drought monitor, as I'm alluding to, in Georgia there's a concern as well, but I just have it on Florida's view. But if you kind of extrapolate outward, you have some of that concern, moderate type of concern as you get into toward parts of South Georgia here. They haven't had rain maybe all month there on Albany, which is not good at all. But you can see here Tallahassee, Monticello, areas there like Live Oak, Jasper there, and getting further north, you have that moderate drought. You have Stark now, abnormally dry, Gainesville, abnormally dry, Crawfordville, Perry. So, week by week, if you start to see more of these colors pop up in the southeast Florida, they've had a really good day in their drought because of all the precip. You don't have too much too quick, but hadn't been just terrible, not just completely, awful in terms of like flash flooding. They had a bad drought in Texas back, in the summer, and they had a catastrophe with all those, all those fatalities there in Central Texas, that flooding, which was just awful, awful, as we're looking here. And then, obviously we don't have that kind of drought. We don't have that kind of rain in the forecast here. We have the logo blue. We're dressing casual tonight because we're not too concerned about things right now. Doesn't mean later on, the weeks ahead, there might be a concern, but, overall, just pop-up storms here and there. And we watch out for some fog here too, so be aware of that as you're looking, as you're tracking things, but not an overwhelming concern here. You can kind of see, just leave plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you if you have that dense fog. Hazardous driving conditions possible at times due to low visibility. We're just kind of keeping an eye on all of these here. Slow down and give yourself extra time to reach your destination. Make sure your vehicle is as visible as possible there to other vehicles by using your low beam headlights. Just so important, keeping these tips in mind. If you do that now and just drive safe, you'll probably, be, okay there. But as we go ahead and look Those football forecasts. I know that's what you guys are waiting for. If you're staying up late, if you're watching live, or if you're watching later on, this is what you guys want to see as we're looking at things, as you're tracking things. I know we're 64 right now here east of Stark, and just double checking, yes, still 64. That minimum here, and it's going to get a little cooler. But for the game there, east side out of Gainesville, the Rams coming to town to take on the Bradford Tornadoes there. Our Bradford County squad, both teams 3-1. Bradford came up a little bit short against Mandarin, but side coverage there, and the squad, they're going to be in this one here where 15% chance of rain, passing shower, not out of the question. Technically, we had some lightning pop up in Georgia, but we don't have a thunderstorm risk here for this based on what Storm Prediction Center saying. So pretty low, mostly clear to expected, but it'll be breezy. So keep that in mind. You might not expect that. The wind will be around some. Not as much as a Jaguar game on Sunday, probably, when they're taking on the Texans. But yeah, definitely be aware of this. But, it's just exciting here, getting the word. I know it's kind of, as you're looking at things, you might already want to call it fall, but fall with the calendars coming up here just officially a couple days away, a few days away. So again, upper 70s here, 15% chance of rain, breezy, but mostly clear. So again, that's pretty good football weather. As we're looking, as we're tracking things. I know things haven't been too humid. Now, the more humid things are, that does reduce fire risk. Not too concerned around here yet. We just gotta be kind of mindful of it. But yeah, just those Friday night lights here as we're looking, as we're tracking things. And then let's go ahead and take you to the FSU forecast now. My Seminoles, I have the baseball shirt on, but it applies to all sports really. 3:30 Saturday on the ACC network. The Kent State Golden Flash is coming to town. Gotta be careful. We saw what happened there in 2023, sadly, with one of these games that the Noles should win handily. But so far, this year, 2025, the Noles took care of business there against that school from Eastern Texas. And going to be a situation here that's hopefully, the Noles do the same before they have a tough road trip up to Charlottesville to take on the Virginia Cavaliers next Friday night. But this game Saturday, 3:30 ACC network, rain chance not extraordinary, but if we get a shower, it could have a lightning strike, and then you could get a delay. 35% chance of rain. So be mindful of that. Lower 90s. So concern is there for some dangerous heat. So be wearing light colored loose fitting clothing. Maybe something like this even might work. Quite honestly, for a game on that Saturday there. A brief storm is possible, so you might want to keep that poncho on hand. Umbrellas are not allowed there, events like these in general. But those ponchos, you might just keep in your pocket just in case you get a quick downpour. But if you get one of those, you might end up having to go into concourse because there's a delay. Hopefully it doesn't happen. It's not a huge chance, but it's not zero. It's a little higher, quite honestly, when you look at the high-res models. So I don't want to just say it's not going to happen. Hopefully it doesn't, but that would be by the time you could get something. We saw a few pop-ups in north South Georgia on that Thursday. But yeah, some dangerous heat there. Wear that sunscreen, obviously. I know it's always a give and take this time of year. We're still in September, so to be mindful of that. Let's say the last 12 hours on this, because this is going to illustrate what I'm talking about. And it'll maybe be a little bit further south, as we look ahead. Let's look like Saturday around Tallahassee. If this stuff were to pop up, it could be there. You see around Albany, we did get some precip. We said we hadn't really had any all month. Well, I don't know if the official measurement changed at the airport, but some parts of town, let me put the metered on it. I think they probably got a little something in here, but just to the east over an inch. At the airport itself, probably quite a bit less. But you can see some of these areas there, Cuthbert, Dawson, here and there, as storms, with a little lightning. Other areas, not so much. So that's kind of the give and take. A lot of areas, nothing at all, and then some areas get an inch. That's kind of an extreme differential there, because I don't even think, about Albany getting the rain. We didn't have any warnings or anything, but some of Albany did get that rain on that Thursday, which, can help with that drought, but it's really localized. I mean, look, a lot of areas, nothing. I mean, look at this here down toward Colquitt County. Parts of Moultrie there, almost an inch. But if you go down a little further south, no rain showing up at all. That light blue is 8/10, 9/10 of an inch. And then some areas not getting any at all. So that kind of illustrates the storyline there as we're looking and tracking things. A little bit of something in northern Jefferson. Some areas getting just over half an inch. Northern Monticello, around Quincy there. See some areas south of Gretna there, almost an inch. But in other areas like Tallahassee, none at all. Thomasville there, I know. Congratulations to CTV on their 70th anniversary. They had a great celebration there. And, they didn't have rain there. That was good for that. But some areas do need the precip. Just, don't want to have them disrupt those plans, obviously. Outdoor plans like that. And then you see that over South Florida. We did have some of that precip there toward the Miami area. 2-3 inches. We need some of that. We don't want to have too much too quick. Some lightning further east where you can't see it on radar, but as they're looking and tracking things, see a little bit of lightning pop up in Missouri there. Probably that's like one strike even. I mean, one. You gotta be a little careful because you couldn't expect maybe a bunch of lightning out of that, but one strike there north of Revinum there, and then west of Potosi. But not too big of a deal, but not many people out this time of night, so hopefully not a big problem. But again, my Seminoles there, what a team so far. Tommy Castellanos there. And we'll have to see how like special teams, Jake Weinberg, how they come up to play in the weeks to come. Because I don't want to go over this too much here, but Miami, Florida State. Hopefully, if it's a wide right or wide left stories for the Miami kicker, I went to FSU, graduated from FSU. Go Noles, obviously, and sorry everybody else watching, but Memphis is my school here, obviously. So I know wide right, wide left. That was a big story. Miami, FSU, and all, and against FSU, really over the years ago, big games. And let's hope this time around, if that's an issue, it's on the Miami side. But Miami's gonna be a really, really tough team. It might, there's a chance Miami might be too good, but it is a system now where I know back then the discussion was that Bowden would have had multiple, additional national titles in addition to the two he had. He might have had like, and I don't have it, I wasn't really around when all this happened, but maybe he'd have had, another couple or a few more national titles if he'd have just won those games with the kick going in, and then, the team would have been able to get to the championship and win. It was just that, one, game that was kind of holding things up for maybe, let's say, Paul Bear Bryant type of resume. So again, let's go ahead. I mean, but he was still, very, very impressive. Don't get me wrong. One of the greatest coaches, obviously, in the history of the sport. But as we go ahead and look here, Florida Gators there at Miami. You see the Gators are really, really struggling. It's been almost as bad as it gets there for them in terms of the football team, quite honestly. I mean, they have basketball to celebrate a national title, and they have a chance to repeat again there, with their coach and with, some of the key players coming back. They'll be down there in Miami Gardens to take on the Hurricanes, who are number 4, Carson Beck, Mario Cristobal. Even though if the games are close, he might not be able to, as we've seen, have, issues there with like taking a knee against Georgia Tech in terms of the end of the game situation there, because if we'd have done that, they would have won. Instead, they tried to run the ball and they fumbled it. And then they lost that game there in 2023, I think it was. And that really was a big issue for me. And Georgia Tech, how impressive that was to beat Clemson there. Haynes Keene and, that great coaching staff there for the Yellow Jackets. They're a really good team. But, Florida, they might be not quite as bad as you think because, I think USF's a little bit better, but you saw what Miami did to USF probably. They won by, many touchdowns. And so I got to expect this is going to probably not be that competitive, but there could be some shower action here in the picture, maybe even a storm developing lower 80s there. We'll see how DJ Lagway and the Gators do in that game on Saturday night on ABC. I know the whole team there's going to be, covering that on those ESPN, ABC, different channels, obviously. And, that's such a, big game for Miami to see if they can keep things going. It's a situation here where they have, FSU had this in a couple of weeks. That could be, and now with the playoff and everything, even before it. I mean, quote unquote game of the century type situation, but you're not going to have that anymore. I mean, not with this playoff. I mean, that's for sure. Maybe a championship game one of the years if two teams are just extraordinary. I mean, you think of LSU Clemson that one year, how great those teams were, but LSU won pretty easy. Quote unquote game of the century type situation. Probably not going to happen anymore, but FSU Miami and Tallahassee a couple weeks from now, both teams have still, stayed healthy and, they're both undefeated still. That could be one of the bigger games, FSU's had this century. Of course, that 2013 title game, winning out there against Auburn. It was Gus Malzahn now, the offensive coordinator, the coach on the other side, but Jimbo Fisher and that great offense there. Jameis Winston, Rashad Green. I was there, at FSU during that time, not at the game. Out there, I went to the games during the year, but was so exciting there for FSU. But Miami FSU. I mean, we had a pretty big one when I was there. I can't remember which year it was. It might have been, let's say, it was one of maybe 2013, I think. It was kind of one of the bigger games I was at there while I was at FSU, and it was just a situation there. As we're tracking there, that Roy is pretty hyped up because I think Mark Richt, maybe I could be wrong on that, but it was one of those games where Miami was really starting to surge and a lot of anticipation, and FSU won easily. It could be a situation where Miami wins easily this time around, that. But in this game, Miami should win easily, but there could be a storm. 55% chance of something. Doesn't mean it's going to be delayed like last week against USF. But I know there's Gators there coming into town. This is pretty much their last chance. If they went out, they'd go to the college football playoff. But not much evidence of that right now on the table for them with the tough schedule ahead. But if they were to win at Miami, win against Texas A&M, Texas, FSU, Georgia, and won all the other games as well, they would go to the playoff. I mean, if they won the SEC title game, even if they won all those and lost the SEC title game, they'd probably still get in with 3 losses. I mean, I'd probably even make the case for them because so many other teams are as good as we think they are if they won. But, it's probably, unrealistic there. And it's probably about, hate to say this, but, for our Gator fans watching, especially we had our 2-10 year last year, but for Gator fans, it's probably a situation where, just things are going to have to start all over again for football. But, basketball team doing well there for the Gators. And then the Jaguars there, week 3 in the NFL, they're going to have Trevor Lawrence, Cam Little, the kicker, that whole squad there. Middle 80s there, 40% chance of rain. So, we'll have to watch that there. But, 1 o'clock on CBS, Spirididis there and Adam Archuleta on the call. Just kind of watching that there. And, it's a situation where it'll be a little breezy. That northeastern wind direction there. It'll be pretty warm. I know CBS doing those throwback NFL, game, like, coverage there. I know that pregame, I believe Brent Musburger is going to be on that. That was the plan anyway, leading up there at 12 on CBS. And then 1 o'clock there, Spirididis and Adam Archuleta on the call on CBS. But, that wind could be a little bit of a factor. Middle 80s, once these temperatures not quite as bad like FSU, where the heat could be a bigger issue with, dehydration, heat stroke. But you see here, middle 80s there, 40% chance of rain. The breeze will be something the kickers have to watch. Shower storm is a possibility there. Not an overwhelming chance, but you just never know here. It's not out of the question, so just remain alert. Poncho might be a good idea to have that on hand there, but again, like in Tallahassee, if we had something pop up, maybe a little bit better chance there, 40 versus 35, like in Tallahassee. But, it's a situation you might want to be in a spot here where, as you're looking at this, as you're tracking this here, have that poncho just in case, because it's better safe, than sorry. But in the lightning there, give a shower, you might get a lightning strike and get a delay like you did the other game. And, before that, game week 1, Carolina hadn't had a delay in a few years since that Baltimore game. But Jacksonville won that and ended up winning the playoff game later on against Justin Herbert after all that. What a great comeback that was by Trevor there against, going back at the end of that 2022, season, first game in the playoff there, to come back from such a large deficit there, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And again, came there. I think it's Everbank Stadium now. It's what they're calling. I think it used to be Everbank Field. I think they're going with Everbank Stadium now. But, such an exciting game there, against that division rival, Houston, and kind of, it's a situation here where the Jaguars, want to stay healthy, obviously, on the field. That didn't happen, unfortunately, last year with Trevor Lawrence in that one last year. But, big game there, Jacksonville and Houston. You have C.J. Stroud, the quarterback, on the other side there. So we'll see how that one goes. See if Jacksonville can go to 2-1 in the AFC South. They'd, be potentially tied for first place if Indy loses there in their next game, but otherwise they're, in a spot where they'd be in sole second at least. And, 2-1 versus 1-2 at this point, a huge difference to the first year coach like Liam Cohen there. And as we go ahead and see that extended forecast, you can see looking there 92 here on your Friday, 91 on Saturday, 89 on that Sunday here. So a little bit of a cooler picture with the temperatures in a way, but you have more humidity, so it's not going to make much of a difference with the heat index. You have your rain chances going up some. We need the rain now here. We have 40% on Sunday, 40% on that Monday, going down to about 30% on that Tuesday night. A huge difference. We see 90 on Tuesday and Wednesday. You see the lows there. That average more so than what we were dealing with before. Not, overwhelming, but not quite as cool at night. But it's been pretty cool. We're at in the rural area. We're at 64 here at this point. In the night there too, something in the morning. If you're watching live, of course, that's more important. And if you're watching later on in the replay if you're watching on Facebook, on Twitter/X, YouTube, or Twitch, I know you see 40% chance of it on this Wednesday ahead and 50% on that Thursday. So a situation here. So we start to see that kind of increase a little bit, as you're looking ahead and toward that timeline. It's a situation here where that rain chance does start to go up just a little bit here. So I have to be mindful of that, obviously, because it could start to go up even more so in the word next Friday. I know if it's in the road then. And, some teams, I think Bradford's on the road next Friday too. I'll have to double check on that. But, it's a situation here where, we have some stuff here. The high school games around could have some concern wherever you are. Wherever Bradford is, could be some concern to Ward next weekend, but it's a little too early to say for sure. It wouldn't be anything tropical, I wouldn't think. It'd be more like a line of storms or something like that, with a boundary. But it's a little too early to get into that. You only go 7 days here, but it's always important to kind of keep you guys advised on that forecast here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here. So, again, you see the overall weather picture. I know, a little more casual tonight. Have my FSU baseball shirt on, but and you have some, baseball players, practicing obviously in the fall before spring. But it's about that football team here. They know all the athletes there, all the different sports programs there in Tallahassee. Go Noles there, the garnet and gold. So important. I'm so excited when we won that title in 13. Hoping we'll get that chance in 23. It didn't happen. One in 93, one in 99, of course. Wasn't Roy Watson back then, but what a great squad there this year, hopefully. And it's too early to know for sure, obviously, as we've alluded to here, how good they really are. But Coach Mike Norvell there, you got to feel for him after what happened in 23, but then all the players, Jordan Travis's injury, you had Tate Rodemaker, and he had that chance, and then he got hurt against UF, and then, it didn't work out. That next game, not quite as impressive, and folks, we're looking there, and Brock Glenn came in first game. He tried really hard, and they won. That's all you do. Just like I think the Ohio State coach said week 1 there with their first game, quarterback Julian Sayin there coming on in. They're just kind of managing to win, not trying to impress. If they knew they had to impress, FSU, maybe they'd have done something different, but they were just trying to win the ACC championship, which they did, and 13-0 should have been enough to get them in the playoff there. We've talked about it enough, but you get the idea. Probably would have won the title now, because I don't think Michigan, JJ McCarthy and them, I don't think they would have been an issue for FSU, even with Tate Rodemaker. Texas is the one I always talked about. That even though maybe they didn't deserve to be in either, they would have been the one. I think their offense might have been enough, actually, even though they didn't beat UW Washington. Their offense might have been enough to get past FSU there with their quarterback, Quinn Ewers there. So, again, tracking things in regard to that. So, that's something you always watch, but a little more casual tonight. The Noles, Tallahassee, FSU, their game. Of course, we have the Gators with their big game as well, but it's really about just staying alive, into playoff race. As we're looking at things and tracking things there, it's going to be, something where if they win that one, then things just change all of a sudden for them for sure, as we're going down there to Miami Gardens. But Let me see if there's any questions or comments. We do see a little sour, it looks like there, maybe. It might just be ground clutter with the fog. I'm not. Let's check our METARs here. But some fog set up around Keystone here, only for the miles. Be careful there, obviously. Some of this might just be the old ground clutter pattern, to be quite honest. Let me try something else here. It could be, I mean, something. Let me check water vapor. I have another mode where I can double check. I don't have it where I can get to it as easy on camera like this. So, you know, you have pretty dry air, so you have that fog potential, maybe a quick sour as we're looking there, as you're tracking things. And some of that's probably just the fog showing up there as we're tracking the overall situation, because I put in a high, you know, sensitivity mode there. But let me go ahead. I'll try to pull up our other source. I don't, you know, I wouldn't have it up if I knew we had to use it here. Not gonna be that easy for me to get on camera, I don't think, but we're just gonna kind of pull it up really, you know, fast here as we're looking, as we're tracking things. I'll just throw up the coverage map real quick. We're always on top of things, obviously. You know, any tornado warning storms, we've been doing that for almost 6 years now for our 62 counties on all the different platforms, for a little less than that. But, you know, it's always important is to kind of stay tuned here and stay safe in that regard as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. I mean, there's a lot of ground clutter, foggy type look on this radar up at Jacksonville. I mean, it's weird that both radars are picking them up. It may be some showers, quite honestly. I kind of would lean toward it being a few sprinkles at least, even if they're having trouble getting down, because the way the pattern looks on the radar. But let me go ahead and jump back on over to that here. So yeah, you see, I'll loop this around because they wouldn't be moving probably if it was fog, but there's a consensus to a southeastern movement. So I think that might actually be some areas of rain within all this clutter, fog, you know, potential there. So that's what it kind of looks like there on Coffee County and Douglas there. Then kind of an unusual situation trying to pick that out on the fly, but it does look like a little bit of some, you know, quick downpour action there around State Road 32. And then also around State Road 135 here, as we're looking at things, you know, late, if you're watching live, you know, at, let's see here, so 2:22 a.m. So let me see if there's any questions or comments now. I just wanted to clarify that because I always want to make sure we're getting, you know, reflectivity right there. Normally it's not that tricky to pick out, but, so again, I have some different folks watching here. Somebody in it looks like maybe St. Paul area, I guess in Minnesota then watching just a situation. I appreciate everybody tuning in and trusting me then, you know, with all this. Look up that way real quick on the national view with all the precip. You see some stuff there on Minneapolis, you know, and off to the north and west around Wilmer there. Wilmer, it's not my area, but as we're looking here, St. Cloud, you see some stuff there, and then as we get into more parts of Iowa, you see some showers here. You know, again, we talked about stuff in Missouri earlier on. There are some, you know, legit thunderstorms in Oklahoma, a little bit in North Texas there, and the like. So again, we're just watching things, you know, the Knowles. It's not what you call a huge game, but every game is huge, you know. Obviously, they lost that one. That'd be just, you know, I mean, you saw Notre Dame come back from the last year losing to a team that nobody would have thought they would have lost to, but you know that's not so. Yeah, schedule ahead. I mean, you would expect FSU to, you know, if they don't win that one, you know, then they're not as good as we thought they were. So they should win very easy against Kent State. You know, the Golden Flashes there from up north. So again, just a big game there ahead in that regard, because that becomes a big game when you're in the college football playoff discussion. I appreciate everybody tuning on in here. Gators have a big game against Miami. Miami's a big game, obviously, there than South Florida. It's a bigger game by far, technically, you know, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. So have a great night. Stay safe, everybody. And we'll be back here, you know, if we have to cut in for any of those, you know, weather game issues like toward, you know, whether it's Jacksonville or Tallahassee or South Florida there. And we'll be on top of it, obviously. I'm talking about not Buccaneer game, but the one with the Gators and Miami there. So we'll be watching all that here for you. Again, I appreciate everybody tuning on in on all the different platforms. Have a great night. stay safe, and we'll be back here again as conditions warrant. So enjoy that weekend, everybody. Again, just try to enjoy things as we have some of those cooler temperatures around. At least we're not dealing with hurricanes like what we dealt with, the last several years. Had just so many issues. Not over the season yet. You still got to remain alert. Things can change rapidly, but at least in the short term, things are looking all right. Again, things can change quick. Not saying it's over by any stretch, but right now we got to just enjoy things day by day, and they're looking, pretty calm still. I mean, a few pop ups as we've talked about, but overall, watch that rip current risk. Otherwise, weather-wise, you're rumble thunder, go inside, rumble thunder and thunder roars go indoors, but otherwise, things are looking pretty good.